You join me today on a crisp autumn day in the heart of London's Marylebone district, on my way to see Sarah Marshall of John Boyd Hats. John Boyd Hats is an iconic millinery shop that has been behatting all of London since 1947. I'm here to see Sarah Marshall, who took over the business in 2018. We'll be chatting all things hats, history, design, fashion and style. All the things, really. If that sounds like something you enjoy watching, please consider subscribing for more millinery videos. Let's go inside and see what Sarah has in store for us. Hello and welcome to a millinery interview video. My name is Ilona, I'm a milliner based in London, and today I'm joined by another milliner based in London, Sarah of John Boyd Hats. How are you?
Hi, very well. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Oh, thank you so much.
Nice to see milliners.
It's so nice being in your shop. It's such a lovely place.
Thank you. I do love it. I have to say, very lucky. We just moved here about a year and a half ago. It's really tiny, but it's in this lovely street, New Quebec Street, which is in Marble Arch in central London. And it's all little pretty independent shops and businesses and lots of people who make things. And I love the space. It's got a nice feel about it.
The name on the shop is John Boyd.
Yes.
And your name is Sarah Marshall.
Yes,
so
I'm not John Boyd.
How did you get here?
So John Boyd started the business in 1947. So he had his first little shop in Knightsbridge. And he started making hats for all sorts of Chelsea ladies and lovely ladies in the area. And then he went on to make hats for all sorts of famous people. I started working for him about 17 years ago, and I really walked in as a complete beginner. I had done some millinery, which was wonderful, but I was still very much a beginner at that stage. And I kind of said, do you need a milliner? And he said, yes. And then he was wonderful. He took me under his wing, and I was kind of like unofficially an apprentice, I suppose. So he taught me mostly about the line of the hat and how to flatter a woman's face, and how to make a trimming look light, like it's just landed on a hat rather than being hammered on, which we always say. I worked with him for, as I say, probably about 15, 16 years. And he died in 2018 when he was in his 90s. He was still doing millinery. He loved it. It was his life. And he was such an amazing, wonderful character. So inspiring, I can't tell you. And then at that time, I was hugely honoured and overwhelmed to find out that I'd inherited the business, which was amazing. And yeah, I still feel quite emotional about it.
And you try and keep his spirit alive.
Yes, and I think the amazing thing is really that he wanted the name to continue. So I felt like, having the business, it wasn't just about having my own hat shop or making hats. It was about keeping John Boyd going as a brand, really, or as a label, as we might say, I think.
And do you carry his styles through in the modern work?
Yes, I do. So his influence is very much in my designs now. I mean, partly because I worked with him for such a long time, so I really grew to kind of understand his way of doing things, but also I do love that aesthetic. He always said that we don't really follow fashion, that it's more about kind of flattering somebody and making them feel really beautiful, working with their face shape and their hair and the occasion and the outfit. It's very, very personal, but also I like the slightly vintage look, and I think the 40s when he started was really just such an amazing era for hats, and when people would go out wearing a cocktail hat for cocktail hour and that kind of thing. So we still have quite a lot of that influence in our work, I would say.
That's definitely something I try and carry through. Exactly. I don't leave the house without a hat myself.
Well, that's amazing. If only more people were like that, I think that'd be so nice.
We'd all have more business.
Yeah, exactly.
With the 40s influence, I read in John Boyd's obituary that he was apprenticed to one of my favourite milliners, Aggie Tarrop.
Yes. When Mr. Boyd we always called him Mr. Boyd as well, it's funny. But when he was very young, he was from Edinburgh, and he was working in a factory making rubber things. So he was making camouflage for tanks and also Wellington boots and hot water bottles. But he found the work quite boring, so he used to sit and do sketching. And then a lady from London was having a tour of the factory, and she saw his sketches, and she said to him something along the lines of, you're wasted here, let me introduce you to my friend in London. So she took him to London to meet Agatha, or Tarrop, I think you probably pronounce it, something like that. And then he became his apprentice and worked with him up until the war. And then he was in the Navy in the war, and in the D-Day landings as well.
Wow, what a weird historical arc to go on.
Quite
from
amazing. And he was so
rubber
young.
factory to war to hat shops.
Well, he was ever so young as well. And when after the D-Day landings, everyone was given a wartime gratuity, so they were given some money, and he used that to set up his first shop.
With all the progression through the decades, I know that Aggie Tarrant made the Queen Elizabeth II's going away hat, and then Mr. Boyd made Princess Diana's going away hat.
I didn't know that. That's lovely. Yeah, yeah. So
and wouldn't it
nice.
have been wonderful if you'd have been asked to make Catherine's or Meghan's going away hat if they still had those?
I don't know if they did actually.
I don't think they had any going away hats. That's such a shame.
Really a kind of tradition that's gone, hasn't it?
Yeah. You spoke a little bit about Mr. Boyd not really following fashion, but following more individual style and personality.
Yeah.
How did he interpret people's personality into the hats?
Well, I think it's a really big part of making hats for people is meeting the person that you're going to make it for. So he felt very strongly that the milliners should meet the clients and talk to them and get to know them. And we do an awful lot of almost being agony aunts, I think, and looking after people as well. So you do get to know their personality. And, the more you talk to people, the more you find out what they feel comfortable in and what makes them feel good and what the occasion is. He always said as well, you should never put someone in a hat that they don't like. So if you think this hat suits this person so well, they look amazing in it, but they just feel awkward in it, it's not their personality, they feel shy or they whatever, then it's not right because they won't wear it well. So you put someone in a hat that they love, they're going to stand taller, they're going to feel really good, they're going to wear it really well, and it all comes through.
And do you find that depending on someone's face shape or features, that different style lines will suit them more than others?
Definitely, yes, absolutely. I always think it's quite a lot to do with your cheekbones, how wide your face is here, depending on how wide the hat is as well. That makes a big difference. Mr. Boyd had a few tricks as well that were really good. So for example, can I show you a hat?
Yes, let's walk over.
So this one is a little style that he started making in probably the 50s, I would say. We call it our rose beret, and it's not changed an awful lot throughout the ages, I don't think. So it's really a cocktail hat, as I was saying earlier. But the idea of this is that the rose sits right by your eye, so it draws all the attention to the wearer's eyes. So it's like a little kind of trick. And the little veil, which Mr. Boyd always said is like adding eyeshadow, kind of makes your eyes sparkle, having a little bit of veil. Very
and you
flattering.
don't have to put so much makeup on.
Yeah, perfect.
With the trimmings being at eye level and things, I think that's a trick that Aggie Tarrant does a lot as well.
Perhaps that's where he got it from. Perhaps that's where he learnt it, I should think.
Yeah, because if you look at some of Aggie Tarrant's 40s hats, they're quite asymmetrical.
Well, everything tipped forwards then as well, didn't it?
Yes.
So it was more kind of everything facing forwards and on the front of the head as well.
And then the further you get in the decades, the more backwards it slides. These hats behind you right here, this one looks like it's such a fine straw. Is that a vintage?
This is vintage.
Wow.
So this is, I believe it's called Ballybuntle. So I'm not entirely sure because I was calling it Parabuntle, but I don't think it's quite Parabuntle. No. And but it's really beautiful, and it's obviously all hand woven. So
I've heard stories that they used to use child labour to get it that thin.
Well, I think probably a lot of the history of products that were made is not very great. But this is interestingly, because I was thinking about the very same thing. So with this is part of my summer sustainable range that I made. So trimming them up and making them lovely, but giving a percentage of it to the weavers in Madagascar who are using raffia. So very sustainable. So I feel like a little bit of giving back, because obviously they were made a long time ago and I don't know the circumstances.
It would almost be, I think, more disrespectful to just throw them out after hours of
there's
work.
a big debate around that, isn't there, with materials in general.
Another modern sustainable material is cineme. And these days you can trace it back to exactly where it comes from and know that the workers are being paid fairly.
Absolutely. And cineme started as a foundation material and a packing material.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's amazing. We've got lots of beautiful materials, actually. We're very lucky. So we've got over here as well, you can see some lovely raffia, Swiss raffia leaves that have been hand woven like this, which I think they're rather amazing, aren't they? Think about the work involved in that.
Gosh.
And I think that raffia was used a lot in the 60s, I believe. I mean, I think it's very hard to date things. So you don't know exactly when things were from, but Switzerland was the place for that.
Switzerland still is the place, isn't it? With like you can still buy
yes,
a lot
you
of
can
the.
still get some there, can't you? And Italy, I think you can get some as well. And this ribbon as well for this pink hat. That's lovely raffia ribbon. So we've got lots of that kind of thing, which is really nice. But also like lovely old silks, like this lovely green.
Yes, I did notice that when we first came in, and it
gorgeous.
shines
It's like
in a way. Oh, it's my favourite colour too.
It's gorgeous.
It shines in a way that's completely different to modern.
Yeah, it's so lovely, isn't it? It's just got that really deep lustre. Really stunning.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you keep all the hats kind of vintagey in style, or do you try and modernise them in some ways?
I think there's a mixture. I think we do have some shapes that really are vintage. Because we're using the vintage block, so they do come out looking very vintage. But I would say most of them have something modern about them as well, because we're working with the outfits, which are obviously modern, and we don't actually have many people who wear vintage-inspired clothes. So we do have some shapes that are really clean and sharp and more modern like that. But I think it's very difficult with millinery to say what is vintage anyway, because there's been so many hats. If you think about how many years hats have been going, how many hats have been made, how many styles have been made, they kind of get recycled over and over again. And I feel like there's no such thing as a new hat.
This is a question I always find myself grappling with, because I learnt a lot of my techniques from books directly. When you've not been taught by a person, the only way to test something out is to actually make it yourself.
Yeah.
And from a written set of instructions.
That's
so they do
clever.
always come out looking like a vintage piece,
yes.
like it could be in a museum or something, and then I look at it and I think, hang on, this looks like something I've seen before.
Yes.
And so it's very difficult to know what's an original design,
Absolutely.
if there is such a thing, or what can be
right.
looked at as a copy, which is unfortunate.
I would say one of the biggest things about vintage and more modern is sometimes down to the technique. So, for example, I always think that now millinery is much harder, like as in like things are stiffened quite a lot. So I don't know when you found reading the books, they probably aren't really stiffening things as much.
No,
so
not
things
at
were a
all.
lot softer. And felts as well, Mr. Boyd never wanted to stiffen felts, so we always used like a blocking net underneath. So
But these days you can't get Paris net anymore at the moment.
No.
So you kind of have to stiffen
you
the
do have
hats.
to stiffen things, and also you have a shop and people are going to handle things and try them on, then you don't want them to lose their shape as well. Although I think wire is a real key to that, like having a really good wire frame, or using wire around the edges or on the brim and making it really perfect will keep the hat in shape pretty well. So has this got underneath it? Actually, this has got blocking net underneath it.
Oh.
So can you see how soft it is still?
That's very soft.
It is soft.
Oh,
but,
wow.
But it keeps the shape, because it's got, if you put your hand here, you can feel the texture. It's got blocking net under the lining.
Oh yes, that's definitely blocking net.
Yeah. So that's keeping the shape. So it's not going to go out of shape, but it's still got that lovely softness of the beautiful peach bloom. And this is stiffened a little bit, but again, not too much, because I just like things softer.
Yeah.
I just think it's really lovely, and doesn't have a wire or anything. So
Yeah.
it's got a nice.
It feels like a very Princess Anne hat.
It could be, I suppose. It's very 60s.
Yes.
So Mr. Boyd made lots of her hats in the 1960s.
Oh.
So she was a real trendsetter in the 60s. Apparently she used to come running into his workroom in like a man's shirt and bare feet and like try things on. Actually, there's some nice pictures of her, let me show you. So with this really fun hat with a big daisy on the back, just really cool. And I think that's made in straw cloth. A lovely picture of her there with a kind of turban style cap in a little mini skirt.
Those are some of my favourite styles.
So pretty. And I think I've seen a colour picture. I think it's pale yellow and pink. So really cool.
It's very on trend for, I think, next spring.
Oh really? I'll have to find the block and remake it. I made this one in the lockdown when I was working from home and I couldn't do anything else. I got out one of the old blocks that would have been used for Princess Anne and made this hat inspired by hers, which is like a huge swooshy. I mean, this is 70s really, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Late 60s, early 70s, before the floppy brims came in.
Yeah, but it's just so fun. I just really enjoyed making
I'd call that shape a bubble beret.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
So there was another milliner who I really enjoy her style. Her name was Edna Wallace.
Okay,
and I've got a video on Edna Wallace, which I will link to in the top right. And she made a lot of hats in this kind of bubble beret shape.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And she also did the the little decoration on the top with things dangling down. I've always found that so exciting. I think this might work with the hat I'm wearing now as well. Something similar.
You could definitely. No, so I had fun with that. Good.
We've now wandered into the workroom, which is at the back of the lovely little shop. And this is where you make all the hats in this tiny space.
Yes. Yes, it can be quite cosy with 3 of us working here.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah, but it's great. So we've got a lovely work table. We've got some natural light, which is always good for hand sewing. The ironing station here for ironing and blocking, and then all the beautiful blocks here. So I've managed to squeeze quite a lot into this space. We've got all our, if you look up here, we've got feathers, all sorts of feathers and lovely things. And then I've got this rather beautiful haberdashery cupboard here, which is full of flowers as well. It's a nice space to work in. It's lovely. I mean, it's always creative mess, you know, there's bags of velvet on the floor and all sorts everywhere, but that's what happens when you're busy making things.
And what's your process like when you design a hat? Are you making collections, or is it just one hat at a time?
So we do a lot of bespoke. So a lot of my time is spent making bespoke hats. So I dye to match as well. So we have people's outfits here, and then I do the dyeing in the kitchen and colour match all the different materials. And then in the winter months, like now, this is when we start making new collection. We don't make a collection that far in advance. Like a lot of fashion houses will have their collections ready, finished by now, but we're still working on ours. And then we start usually to get busy again in around March, April time. So we're very quiet in the winter months. It's very seasonal, this kind of, this side of millinery.
Say I'm going to Ascot.
Right.
And I need something that will be Instagrammable from all angles.
So for Ascot, you can really just go for it. You can wear something crazy and fantastic, and generally I like to think all the hats look good from all angles. But I wouldn't worry so much about, for example, having a bit of hat over your eye or something like that. Whereas for a wedding, you don't want that, because for photographs, mothers of the bride don't want to be hidden underneath the hats. I would say, I mean, you could do something kind of a bit bonkers like this. A big cream cake of a hat.
Oh, wow. What a wonderful description.
It's ever so soft and pretty, looks really lovely, and it's got movement, which I think for Ascot is so nice because you're outdoors, so all the feathers will like fluff around and look beautiful, and you'll look very glamorous. Actually, the colour's lovely on you.
Oh, thank you.
Really pretty.
It suits the pink and the...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very nice. I feel a bit like I'm in My Fair Lady.
Yeah. Well, there we go. Perfect.
Perfect for Ascot. And what if I wanted something just a little more sensible? Maybe I'm going to like a work cocktail do.
Oh, okay. Well, what about trying this one then? Because this is rather beautiful. This is this little vintage shape.
Oh, wow.
I'll show you how it goes. Sits like that. So it's
asymmetrical. That's really comfortable as well.
Oh, good, yeah. So it's asymmetrical, so it looks a little bit like a beret from the front, but it's got this lovely twist that works around, so it's a bit unusual. But I think you could definitely pull that off. Work function room.
Oh, yes. Oh, wow. Oh, that's so pretty.
It's unusual, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's a vintage block, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Or is it a spartery?
It's a vintage handmade block, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's rather nice. And let me just show you that pink one that I was talking about earlier. This one, the little cocktail number, because it's just so pretty. It really suits you. I mean, you do suit hats, definitely.
Oh, thank you.
But do you see this? The way this one works is with the pink rose just coming right to your eyes, drawing all the attention to your eyes, and then you just got this very neat little cage veil that comes around. So, cocktail party.
Thank you so much for having me at your shop today.
It's been lovely to see you. Really nice to chat. It's been very interesting.
And that was my very pleasant morning with Sarah Marshall of John Boyd Hats. You can find Sarah at her shop in New Quebec Street, or visit www.johnboydhats.co.uk. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, liking and subscribing. See you next time. Bye.